We are back with another one of our wonderful therapists. I am Jake Jackson Wolf, one of the co-owners, clinical supervisors, and therapists here at Be Well Counseling Services.
And I'm Katie Cashin. Also, I don't know why I feel on the spot with that. I am also one of the co-owners, clinical supervisors, and clinical therapists here at Be Well.
I could have handed it off to you, but
I think you did. I think you did. I just didn't catch it.
we are joined today by Tatiana Ellerbe, who's a licensed graduate professional counselor, one of our therapists who's been with us for just over a year now. And we are so excited to be having this conversation with her today. Tatiana, before we launch into our questions, is there anything that you want to say by way of introduction?
Yeah, no, I am just very excited to be in this space with you all. It's something that I have continuously said and will continue to do so is just how the community that Be Well has created for me. I've just learned so much from you all, and I'm just super excited to be here, super excited to share this space with you and share a little bit more about about myself and my approach.
Cool. So you know what's coming your way. Our first question is our favorite, which is, what's your client Venn diagram?
Yes. So this is something I've been giving some thought to. I would say I typically work with people who are in their early 20s through about their mid 40s. It's something about the angst of like early adulthood that really pulls me in. I think it's just like a point that I can really connect to. But I would say the bulk of my work really involves examining interpersonal relationships. And so if I were to draw out a Venn diagram, the most inner portion of it would include attachment, abandonment wounds, and just nervous system dysregulation. Mm. And so if anyone who knows anything about attachment theory, right? Like we know that the quality of our relationships and the ways in which we form attachments are influenced by early interactions with caregivers. But I think we live in such a unique time. And so if, we're to add a bit more to it, we also exist in the age of social media and instant gratification. And so relationships and dating are quite complicated, and they're not traditional anymore. People are dating very differently. And so in my work, I've really seen a lot of past abandonment wounds and how they influence the ways in which we show up. They often push us into a place where it literally feels like we're grasping at straws to regulate ourselves in the ways that we best know how. And spoiler alert, right? A lot of the ways that we've learned to regulate ourselves and sort of ease those anxious feelings, they're counterproductive. And so I'd say the core of my work is assisting people in recognizing when their attachment system is activated, helping them explore the ways in which they respond, and ultimately just create a sense of safety and security within themselves.
I want to clap. I just want to clap.
I had to put a lot of thought into this question. This one was the heavy hitter.
Seriously, it's like, from what you say, it's one of those, you go into a room and it's like, raise your hand if this resonates with you, and like all hands go up, and it's a room full of demographics and humans, and yeah.
Absolutely.
I think you're starting to hint at that. You're starting to hint at our next question a bit, which is about then what is it that brings people in to see you?
Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, life is hard. It's not getting any easier. And I think we're all doing the best that we can with what we have. And more times than not, right? Like we need a little bit more than that. And so I would say people are coming to see me because they want to be kept company in the hard parts of being a person. They're wanting to explore like alternative ways of thinking. And I think they are looking for a little extra push in stepping out of their comfort zone.
Mm.
You put something pretty profound there very succinctly, which it's still hitting me as I think through each of those words carried a lot of weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, while I take a minute to recover from that, what's your why in this work? I think you've alluded to it a little bit, but
Mm.
what gets you excited about being a therapist?
Yeah. So a little bit like personal background story. I always knew that I wanted to work in mental health. And as I was going through undergrad, I wasn't really sure in what capacity. And so I worked in like a residential setting. I was assisting people who were in active crisis. And I'm very appreciative for that role because it taught me a lot about myself and the mental health system as a whole. Um, it's a very flawed system, and it often prioritizes the wrong things. And so at the time, I found myself reflecting on the ways that I have and can continue to make an impact. And I think what I saw pretty immediately was, right, like just being able to connect with people, right? Like you might not have an answer or a solution, but like sitting with them in the hard parts, it really had an impact. And so something that I've been saying a lot recently that I feel really resonates with me is the magic is in the connection, right? Like therapy works when you are able to connect. And so that's what I do. I try to create like a very safe space for my people. And I hope in doing so, right? Like they feel empowered to be vulnerable, to remain curious, and to just, do the best that they can. And so I would say my why is really just the connection, right? Like being that person who they feel that they can turn to, because as we don't always have the support, we're not always as fortunate to have the support. And so if I can be that for someone, that's enough to keep me showing up every day.
Mm. We, got to have this awesome group supervision meeting yesterday. Jake and I were just talking about it earlier, how great that felt. And you talk so much about this. And again, to hear you share it here, to be newer to the private practice setting, like you were saying, transitioning into really this one-on-one work that allows you to go deeper with clients, that you have had, I'm going to say, the confidence to really trust that that magic. And that isn't a given. That isn't a given when you're in a new work environment and when you're doing this in a new way. It's such a gift of yours that you've been willing to trust it, from go in your work here, at least, I can say.
Yeah, I have to say I've been really fortunate to cross paths and work with the people that I do work with.
Mm.
Um, I think they also make it easy in terms of showing up every day. And I'm very appreciative. I think that's something else that just comes to mind a lot. I truly have been so fortunate and so lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is like when we get to talk with you, when I get to talk with you, I don't know, we can get used to there being a like complaining being the culture as therapists, just like, oh, how hard this is, or like what a burden in some ways. And you're real proof of an alternative, an alternative framework for that. You really do show that appreciation. And it seems really generative in your work. To like, let's get down into it. I want to know what it would be like to sit in a session with you. What do sessions with you look like? How do
Okay.
they go?
Okay. I tell people this in every consult call, and they're kind of looking at me, kind of like, so
Okay.
at its bare bones, right? Sessions are very conversational and collaborative. I describe them as structurally unstructured. And that's because I do not lead sessions, but I do make a point to show up intentionally. And so it's important for me to empower my people to take up space because I think we are often taught to make ourselves small, and I don't subscribe to that. And so and so as we warm up to the therapy space, typically I ask people to share what's on top for them or just brain dump their thoughts, right? It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to make sense to you. And or even if it doesn't, that's fine. Like just put it out there. And from there we can really go anywhere, which I think is the fun and super cool part of it all. And so sometimes sessions are a bit more serious and they look like us exploring, right? Like the scary, difficult thing that happened. Sometimes we're talking about our wins or just, right, like things that are going on in the world. And then sometimes it's just us laughing about that like funny video we saw as we were scrolling, right? It's a lot of different things. And I like that I have that variety, right? I think it shows me different versions of my people. I think it shows them a different version of me. And so I think that's something that I truly value and incorporating into the sessions. And you know, like any other therapist, right? Like I have my interventions and the skills that I like to pass along. But more importantly, right, like creating the space that feels safe. That is at the very top of the list. And so I think in having conversation, making it feel like it's something that you know, we can collaborate on, I think it helps with that whole entire process.
Yeah. I'm gonna say your phrase, the magic's in the connection.
Magic is in the connection. Yes, indeed.
And that comes through loud and clear in what you're describing about how your sessions look.
Absolutely. It's like it's a human to human thing, right? Like I think when we're in these roles, there's inherent power dynamics, and that's something that although it may be there, I don't want it to ever feel like it's there. I don't want it to ever feel like a space where, oh, I can't say this thing because like, what is my therapist going to think of me?
Mm-hmm.
No, there's no room for that, right? Like, say the thing,
Mm-hmm.
say it. So I really just try to be very, very authentic, right? Like, that's something that I try to model for my people. And so that they can also be authentic, right? Like, at the end of the day, we are all humans. And so let's connect human to human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in this world that can be so clouded by this hot new intervention, this thing that makes these promises, there's healing in connection. And this is not woo-wooey, this is evidence-based. It's the oldest evidence we have about psychotherapy is that there's there's healing in connection. And
Yeah.
I love hearing how much you center that and give that voice.
Yeah. I think as a new therapist, right? Like starting out, trying these interventions and trying these skills, they didn't always land the way that I hoped. And what I realized is in those moments where maybe I'm feeling a little bit awkward or I'm feeling exposed or anxious, right? Like all of those feels, it was the connection that I fell back on where I'm realizing like, oh, okay, we can move forward from this, or like, all right, we can try this again next time and see how things change or if it's a different outcome. And so I don't think if I had the connection that I do with my people, I'm not sure if I would have felt so empowered to try again. I think I probably would have been a little scared. But yeah, it's the connective component that really it makes a world of a difference.
Yeah. And that's I hate to say what I think we've been saying this entire time, but when you're like newer, uh, in doing this work one-on-one with folks, you really can. Like, yeah, Jake, to your point, you can really, as someone who absolutely did that early on, you can really cling to these modalities and these techniques as a way to like, if I do this, connection will follow. And Tatiana, what you're bringing in here is like connection, and then we'll bring
Yes.
in we'll be able from there to find out what's really going to work here as far as anything we use explicitly in session or the client's going to use.
Mhm.
Yeah, cool.
Absolutely.
Tatiana, what keeps you inspired to come into work every day, whether that's, logging on to a session or coming up here for group supervision yesterday?
Yes. I love this question. This is probably one of my favorite questions that you guys are asking. So
Mm.
there's a few things actually. Um, as I mentioned, right, when I first started, being a part of Be Well has been very transformative, right? Like very appreciative that in starting my career as a therapist, right? Like I am starting here. So my colleagues, you all, right? You guys inspire me professionally. You all are very insightful, and I find myself constantly learning something new or just even gaining a different perspective. And so being here has been such an integral part of my growth as a newer therapist. I've always felt allowed to take the space that I need to explore what the work means for me and to try and figure out the areas in which I feel most energized. And it is something that if we like look back to a year ago to now, it's changed in a lot of ways. And I think that's the part that is so exciting about it all. And so I'm really thankful to just to be here with all of you. In terms of work with clients, okay, so I feel inspired by their resiliency, their tenacity. Um, Most recently, I would say a driving force for me has been my role in assisting them with like unlearning the ways in which society has programmed us, right? Like we are very much so programmed in a lot of different ways. Programmed in the way we think, the way we feel, the way we live. And this programming is unhelpful. And so being able to transition out of it and into a space where we are open, I found that that is like one of the key things in helping us create the changes that we are looking for. And also, right, like getting us out of those places where we feel stuck. And I think, right, like if you ask any therapist, something that I imagine they probably all think or say is it really is an honor to do this work, right? Like I'm truly humbled when I'm sitting in a session with a person and they go like, well, like I've never told anyone this before, but right, like we are now entering into sacred territory. And I am just honored to be able to be with them and to be a part of the journey. I'm grateful that I get to join in and help them along, right? Like as we talk about the obstacles and the successes. And so it's not something that I take lightly. And it really is an honor to share the space with them.
You said a word I love in there, and you applied it in a way that just put something in a new perspective for me. This unlearning, the
Yeah.
process of unlearning, a lot of what folks have learned about going to therapy, whether it's through how they see therapy portrayed, whether it's through pop psychology, whether is that you just go and you talk about your problems for a while. And that phase where they are coming in, where folks are coming in and we are talking, where you are building that connection with them, where sometimes people can feel like, what's the point of talking about this thing that happened in the past? You know, you're saying that's part of unlearning. That's before you can learn something new, before we go on to like the growth and the new behavior and like you living your, coming out as like this new version of yourself. Um, you it's a process of unlearning.
Yeah. There's so much discourse around therapists, therapy, what it all looks like and what it can do. And I think a lot of it is misinformation. I don't know if it's something that is just rooted in how things were, right? Like many years ago, but I think today, right, therapy can look like a lot of different things. And so, yeah, it certainly takes some unlearning in order to be able to like welcome new information and do something different.
Mm.
I think you're speaking a little bit to in the age of constant information flowing towards us. It's like drinking out of a fire hose. And someone goes on to Instagram or TikTok, and some therapist who they've never met and will never meet says, here's the secret that your therapist is keeping from you. And and people just run with that. And I'm all for demystifying this process. I think that's an important part of this work. And there's a lot of things that can get lost in
Yes.
this information overload and hearing things that are meant to apply to an audience of hundreds of thousands of people and taking it as personal psychological advice or
Mhm.
as a personal intervention feels like it's lacking in some nuance for me. um,
For sure. So I I think if you were to ask any one of my clients this, they will tell you that I blame social media for everything, right? Like the root of all evil. But no, right? I can acknowledge the pros of social media, and I do think it has made information more accessible. I think information is often presented in a way that is easier to digest. And I think when we are talking about, right, like raising awareness around mental health, I think all of these things are positive.
mhm,
And there is still a lot of misinformation. It's
mhm.
not a one size fits all type of thing. And so frequently people are coming in and they're saying, oh, I saw this TikTok. Oh, I think I have XYZ diagnosis. And it's like, okay, let's talk about it. Why do you think that? And sometimes people may be following a lead, and sometimes it's like, okay, no, you do not have this thing. Um, but yeah, I think, right, like in being a therapist on social media, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. I think there are certainly some great pages and profiles out there that provides information in a very responsible way. And there are also profiles out there that could use some work around that. And so, yeah, I think it's just something that uh, I'm happy that we have social media as a resource in that way. And also, right, like that does not constitute actual therapeutic services, right? So,
Right. That it should it's really great at eliciting more questions for people, right? Like there's a really great, I'm so aware that we're going to post this on social media. And it's great as a tool to elicit more questions and curiosities and get people access to information that historically they wouldn't have had
Yeah.
access to. And I think you're exactly right that between this overwhelming side and the not knowing how to sort through things because there's not a great there's not a great filter for this is good empirically based information and this is my opinion.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
all kind of blurs together sometimes.
Yeah.
it feels like a full-time, it would be a full-time job with continuing education needed to be able to do that filtering. That's
Yeah.
something I always feel when when my clients come in with something from social media, when I have something in my head going from social media, um, this sounds like I don't know. I think I'm taking this in and I'm like, ooh, this is a challenge to our work at times. This is where we have to do some of the unlearning. But Tatiana, for you, what are some of the challenges along with this that you face in your work?
Yeah. So this very thing, right? Like I'm
Mm.
challenged by the misconceptions placed on
Mm.
therapists, um, placed on the field of therapy. Um, I think we all have had a person at some point in our career, right? Like they come in and they are looking to be fixed and they want to identify solutions to their problems, right? And so the identifying the solutions part is not inherently right or wrong, right? I think of it as it just is. But I don't view my role as a problem solver. And so people who are looking to be fixed, right? To me, when I hear that, that is insinuating that something is broken. And as like, I don't think people are broken. I don't think we can be broken. I think we all heal on our own individual timeline. And so I just think, right, like the misconception that in coming to therapy and, you know, if you come weekly for X amount of time, you're going to be healed, all is going to be well. And it's not, it doesn't typically follow that pattern, right? Like sometimes, honestly, things may feel worse before they start to feel better. And something that I try to remind my people is like, let's trust in the process, right? You may have 5 sessions back to back where we are talking about that hard thing and it feels heavy. And then that sixth session, right? Like maybe we're moving towards a place of acceptance. Maybe we are moving towards a place where we feel that we can get past it, right? And so it's not something that is a linear process by any means. And so I think, right, like just kind of battling against the misconceptions around it as a whole has been really challenging. Um, Something that I know you both probably assume I'm going to say, and I am going to say it. Another thing that has been difficult for me when it has come up is this idea of therapeutic fit. And so it's particularly difficult for me because, right, like I am so honored that people contact me for support. And I'm eager to help in the ways that I know how. But the reality of it is that sometimes a client and a therapist, they're not aligned in the ways that are important for them to be aligned. And so that has been difficult, right? Like having those conversations are sometimes really difficult. And what I try to fall back on is, right, like what I know about myself. And so, what I know about myself and how I approach this work is I approach it in a very relational way. Um, I spend a lot of time really just getting to know my people, right? Like that's having conversations. It may be having the conversations where you are thinking, right, like, how is this related to anything? And I promise there's a method to it. And I enjoy going back to the childhood, talking about all the things, what was school like for you? How was middle school, right? No one gets out of middle school without something happening. It's just hard for everyone. But it's very important for me to explore the past things that happened, right? Because they influence our present. And so I place heavy emphasis on talking and processing. And what I know is, right, like this is not the ideal approach for everyone, and that's okay. And the challenge in all of that is naming it for one, and just embracing, I guess, the discomfort that comes with referring someone out. And I know that discomfort is there, right? Because we're all in the helping field, helping professionals field for a reason, right? And so it feels icky, but what I remind myself is that there's no place for my ego in this.
Mm.
And so I really try to make it a goal to be transparent about the ways in which I'm able to help. And if someone and I are misaligned, right? Like it's my duty to one, get them connected with someone who may be a better fit. But like more importantly, I'm never here to boast my ego or to take on more than what might be appropriate. And so I think that's the challenge, right? Like sitting in those difficult moments where you really want to help. And also, right, like maybe I'm not the right person to help.
Mm. I want you to, I like want you to walk down the road from where our office is, like within 10 minutes of walking, you can get to at least two colleges. Both of which I believe have like counseling programs, undergrad at least. And like, I want you to go in and say that to some
Yeah.
classes. I want you
Yes,
to normalize
yes.
that we are not a fit for everybody. Because that's like the quiet undertone of so much of our training. And it is important for us to stretch and to go beyond the places where we think we are only effective and all of that. But yeah, the some of our training is based off of you should be able to meet with anybody and make it work.
Yeah.
And that's so damaging.
Very. There's certain things that they don't teach you in grad school. And I'll just say that I am happy to have learned this in my first year as a therapist and not later on in my career because it's damaging for sure. And I think it's a very quick and easy way to get to burnout and trying to
Mm.
be that thing for everyone.
It goes back to that unlearning that we can. Katie and I were talking about this morning, whether it's with food or with sex or with money or with all of the things that we talk with our clients about. It's learning to listen to yourself and trust that piece that's in there for a reason, right? That says, okay, everybody around me is telling me that they know better than I do. They're telling me I have this supervisor or this teacher or what have you who is telling me, well, what is it in you that makes you think that you can't work with this client? You can. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's the piece about being pushed or
Mhm.
expanding your perspective about what it is that you can be helpful around. But other times it's actually about boundaries or it's about recognizing that we're not limitless individuals.
Yeah, boundaries. We live in a world that I don't think we honor boundaries uh, the way that we like to believe that we do.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mhm.
She said
Yeah.
it. She said
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I was kind of like
Well,
watching the clock over here for how long it took us to get into this conversation before someone said the B word. Way to go, Jake.
Oh, that I was primed because we were singing the Boundaries song in my house this morning, so I won't.
And how does it go?
Oh, I won't
yeah.
perform it here again because that's a boundary.
Okay, well, maybe not here, but maybe in a different setting. Cause I'm like, well, I've never heard the boundary song.
Oh,
I
it's a
feel like
bop.
I'm missing out.
Oh, of course. Like, of course we found our way. I'm like, three therapists get together. Of course we're gonna find our way to talking about boundaries. I'm glad we did it before time ran out here. Um, I think it goes without saying, if it's not clear, Tatiana, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for I'm just like I'm clocking all the times in this where you just in sharing who you are said like, nope, that's not it. Nope, we don't do that. Nope, we and and so I'm so glad and appreciative. One, that you're here. I think both Jake and I would give that right back to you and say we appreciate getting to work with you. Um, and uh, are so glad that you could feel authentic and comfortable enough to share some truth with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. I truly appreciate you all.
Mm.
Tatiana, I don't need my second cup of coffee this morning because I'm just energized by spending time with you this morning.
Part of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you'd like to have that feeling, folks who are listening in, if you too would like to be energized by Tatiana, um, Tatiana meets with clients virtually, um, and has openings, and you can reach out to her through our website, bewellcounselingservices.com, or you can go like directly to the source herself, Tatiana at bewellcounselingservices.com. Thanks so much for listening in. Thanks, Tatiana, again for joining us. And until next time, be well.
Thank you.